Welcome back everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I am currently in the workshop that I've been in the process of building out over the last couple of months. And man, I gotta tell you, I am really starting to like this place. I've been in here a couple of months now and there's just one thing missing. There's one really important thing that I've been wanting to build ever since I moved in. You see, every time I've needed a work surface, every time I needed to do some work, I just end up using whatever random horizontal surface there is, like this piece of MDF with a couple of sawhorses underneath, or I end up using this small work table of my tool cart. I've even ended up working on this tiny table of the bandsaw. All this is going to change today though. You probably guessed it. Today we're building a work table. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get started. MDF is heavy. Okay, so let's get started building this table. So the first thing I did was model this up in 3D the way I wanted to turn out, and then I made myself a set of drawings that I can work off of. So this work table is going to consist of three main parts: the main tabletop structure and two individual storage units underneath. So first up, we're going to build the main structure that is going to become the tabletop. So I want this to be not only very sturdy, but also very flat. So what I'm going to do is build a quite thick tabletop built up of a grid structure of strips of MDF that we're then going to sandwich in between two full sheets of MDF. So I'll start by cutting up all the pieces and then we can get to how this is all going to fit together. All the pieces for a tabletop structure are now cut and I've laid them out here in the way that will be assembled later. And the reason why I've decided to build this table out of strips of MDF and not, let's say, 2x4s or some other construction material, is that those materials can often warp and bend, and that would make it very hard to create a completely flat surface. And doing it this way with strips of MDF that are assembled on their side and glued and screwed together like this, it's the way to create as stiff as possible of a table without it needing to be completely solid. You see, the height of the material is the most important factor when it comes to stiffness. It's just like this piece of paper that is very flimsy and bends easily on its side, but upright, it's stiff and won't bend. The same thing goes for MDF or any other material. So I've drawn up the structure in a way that all the pieces are offset slightly from one another. And the reason I've done that is that so I'll easily be able to drive in screws from both sides of all the pieces. So right now, I'll start by marking up, pre-drilling and countersinking all the places where I'll drive in screws so that it's very easy to assemble later on. So I drilled all the holes, made sure that everything fit together and dry assembled everything before taking everything apart again. It's now all down there. You see, before I can start gluing everything together, I need to make sure that the table is actually going to end up flat. And the floor in here is everything else but flat. So just starting to glue everything together as is right now would most likely end up with a table just as crooked as the floor. So I used the track from a track saw as a straight edge, and sure enough, it was not only twisted, but it also had a big bow in the middle of it. And the way I fixed that is using some wooden wedges. I wedged up in between the sheet here and the sawhorses until everything was not only flat in both directions, but also level. So now I can start assembling and gluing things for good. So the main frame is glued up, and before I go any further, I wanted to make sure that everything is square. And the way to do that, especially with big structures like this, is to measure the two diagonals. As long as all the sides are straight and the diagonals are the same length, everything should be perfectly square. So now that I've done that, I've clamped the main outside frame in place, and I can now start assembling the rest of the pieces. One side of the tabletop is securely glued and screwed in place. Now all I've got to do is somehow flip this entire thing over and do it all over again. So for a moment there, I thought I'd spilled so much glue so that the bottom sheet that everything was just resting on was glued together with the rest of these pieces here. Turns out I forgot I had screwed it in place. Okay, let's continue. So I'm finally done with gluing and screwing together the tabletop. It's dry and it is basically finished. The next step will be to make the two frames for the cabinets that go underneath each side of the work table. And for that, I've already cut out some parts. And as you can see, I've also cut out all the other parts for the drawers that will go inside of those frames. The construction for the two cabinets underneath the table is going to be pretty basic. It's basically just a frame with a divider in the middle. And then on one side, we're going to have drawers, and then the other side will just be a door with one shelf in it. So I guess there's nothing left to do but get started. And I really hope you enjoyed that time-lapse thingy with all the pieces assembling. Not only is it a lot of work, but now I have to take all this stuff off the table again before I can start working. Ugh. Anyways, let's get started. Since these are pretty big and I want to make assembly as easy as possible for myself, I've decided to join these together with a biscuit jointer. A biscuit jointer uses these little wooden biscuits and makes corresponding grooves in the wood that these fit into. I've laid out the position for where the biscuits will go on both cabinets. So I'm going to do all the biscuit jointing right now, and then we can assemble everything fairly easily afterwards. All the holes for the biscuits are in. I ended up using two different kinds of biscuits. I decided to use the normal wood biscuits for all the sides and then use these more fancy plastic ones that kind of lock and snap together for the divider. And with those nice snappy plastic bits, the divider in the middle will make sure that everything is held in place until I get a chance to screw everything together. The cabinets are done. They did take a little bit of convincing to put together. On one of them, I actually had cut one of the pieces just 2 millimeters too big, and that caused a whole bunch of problems. Nevertheless, they're together now, they're glued, they're screwed, they're dried. The next step will be to remove this overhanging lip. You might have noticed that I haven't cut the top and bottom board of the tabletop to size yet. So I'm just going to simply use a track saw to cut those overhanging pieces off, leaving just a little bit, which we're going to take off with the trim router to make the transition between the two boards perfect. This turned out rather nice, if I'm allowed to say so myself. We've got everything attached together now. I've also put wheels on the two cabinets underneath. The two cabinets are now screwed to the tabletop. I haven't glued it, so I can still take it apart. But the framework for this table is basically finished. As you can see, there's still a lot of parts left, but they will be for the next episode. I think for this episode, we're gonna call it right here. Make sure you subscribe to see the next episode where we're gonna turn all these parts into drawers and cabinet fronts for this work table. We're also gonna do some cool stuff with some 3D printed router templates, so make sure to check out the next video. As for this time, thank you so much for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I see you in the next video. Bye.